Picture this, 1347. You're a French soldier standing beneath the stone gateway of a besieged English castle. Above you, carved into the vaulted ceiling, you see them, square holes in the stone, dark, silent, waiting. Your captain calls them murder holes, and you know what's coming. Boiling oil, molten lead, liquid death raining down on anyone who dares breach the gate. Except that's not what's up there. For 700 years, we've been told the same story. Murder holes were designed to pour boiling oil on attackers. It's in every history book, every castle tour, every medieval documentary. There's just one problem. It's almost entirely wrong. The truth? What actually came through those holes was far more mundane, far more clever, and reveals something profound about how we misunderstand medieval warfare. This is the story of history's most misnamed defensive feature and what it teaches us about the difference between Hollywood history and actual survival. Let's start with the myth, because it's everywhere. The story goes like this. Medieval castles had openings in the ceiling above their gates called murder holes, or in French, meurtrières. When enemies tried to break through the gate, defenders would pour boiling oil through these holes, incinerating attackers in a hellish inferno of burning liquid. It sounds perfect, doesn't it? Brutal, medieval, effective. Victorian historians loved this image. It confirmed everything they believed about the Dark Ages. Barbaric, cruel, primitive. They wrote about it in textbooks. Castle tour guides repeated it to tourists. Hollywood put it in every medieval movie from the 1950s onward. Go to any castle today, Dover, Caerphilly, Château de Fougères. The guide will point up at those holes and say the exact same thing. This is where they poured boiling oil on their enemies. But here's the thing. When archaeologists actually examined medieval castles, when they dug through the historical records, when they looked at military treatises from the actual Middle Ages, they found almost no evidence that boiling oil was ever used. Not at Dover, not at the Tower of London, not at Carcassonne. So what were those holes actually for? To understand murder holes, you need to understand medieval siege warfare. And the biggest threat to any castle wasn't battering rams, it wasn't siege towers, it wasn't even catapults, it was fire. Castle gates were the weakest point in any fortification. Thick wooden doors, reinforced with iron, sealed with massive crossbeams. Strong, yes, but still wood, and wood burns. Here's how medieval attackers actually breached gates. First, they'd advance under protective shields or a mobile roof called a cat or penthouse, basically a wooden shed on wheels that protected them from arrows. They'd push it right up against the gate. Then they'd pile brush, kindling, and logs against the wooden door. They'd soak it all in animal fat, pitch, or oil, anything flammable they could find. One torch and the gate would be engulfed. Medieval chroniclers are full of accounts of castles falling this way. In 1204, Richard the Lionheart's Château Gaillard fell after attackers burned through a gate. In 1264, Kenilworth Castle nearly fell the same way. Fire after fire after fire. Wood burns, iron hinges melt, stone cracks from heat. The gate collapses, the castle falls. So castle designers had to solve a problem. How do you stop attackers from burning your door when they're standing directly beneath it, protected from arrows by their own wooden roof? The answer was murder holes, but not for oil, for water. Here's what actually happened when a castle was under attack. Attackers pile wood and kindling against the gate. They light it on fire. Flames climb the door. Smoke billows. The heat is intense. They think they've won. Then, from the murder holes above, water. Buckets and buckets of water poured through those stone openings directly onto the fire below. Simple, mundane, brilliant. Because unlike boiling oil, which was expensive, rare, time-consuming to prepare, and frankly not that effective, water was everywhere. Every castle had a well. Every castle had a cistern. During a siege, you had thousands of gallons stored. And here's the critical part. The murder holes weren't just randomly placed. They were positioned directly above the gate with a clear vertical drop. Gravity did the work. You didn't need to lean out over the wall and expose yourself to arrows. You just poured. Attackers couldn't stop it. Their wooden cat protected them from arrows, sure, but it didn't have a roof strong enough to stop hundreds of gallons of water. The fire would hiss, sputter, and die. And if water didn't work, rocks. Not boiling oil, not molten lead, just stones. Heavy, blunt, cheap, infinite. Drop a 50-pound rock through a murder hole, and it would smash through any wooden roof, crush crush skulls, shatter the kindling pile. Medieval military manuals, the actual instruction books written by people who besieged castles for a living, mention water and stones constantly. The Byzantine manual, Petty Strategia, from the 9th century, water. The 13th century French treatise by Villard de Oncourt, stones and water. The 14th century English treatise, Tractatus de Armes, same thing. Boiling oil? Almost never mentioned. So why don't we use boiling oil? Let's do the math. First, cost. In medieval Europe, oil was expensive. Olive oil could cost the equivalent of $100 per gallon in today's money. Animal fat was cheaper, but still valuable. It was food. During a siege, when you're rationing supplies, would you really burn cooking fat as a weapon? Second, logistics. To boil oil, you need massive cauldrons, roaring fires, and time. It takes at least 30 minutes to bring a large pot of oil to boiling temperature. Medieval sieges moved fast. Attackers could set a fire and retreat in minutes. By the time your oil was ready, they'd be gone. Third, effectiveness. Boiling oil doesn't work the way movies show it. It doesn't melt armor. It doesn't incinerate people instantly. Yes, it causes horrible burns, but so does boiling water, and water is free. Fourth, danger. Hot oil is insanely dangerous to handle. Spill it on yourself while carrying it up narrow stone stairs, and you've just taken yourself out of the fight. Water? Harmless to the defenders. Fifth, evidence. Archaeologists have excavated hundreds of medieval castles. They found arrowheads, sword fragments, cannonballs, broken siege equipment, but almost no evidence of large-scale oil use. No massive oil storage, no burn residue indicating oil fires, nothing. The few recorded instances of boiling oil in medieval warfare, rare, desperate, last resort moments. The 1453 siege of Constantinople mentions Greek fire, a chemical weapon, not cooking oil. The 1191 siege of Acre mentions defenders throwing fire pots, but systematic use of boiling oil through murder holes? Basically a myth. So where did the myth come from? The boiling oil story exploded in the 19th century during the Romantic movement. Writers like Sir Walter Scott and Victor Hugo were obsessed with medieval chivalry, but they wanted it dramatic, brutal, gothic. Boiling oil sounded medieval. Water didn't. So historians and novelists repeated the story. Castle restoration projects in the 1800s even added features based on the myth, designing murder holes to look more authentic for boiling oil, even though the originals were clearly designed for water. By the 20th century, it was canon. Movies like Ivanhoe 2005, The Kingdom of Heaven 2005 showed boiling oil pouring from murder holes. Video games like Age of Empires made it a game mechanic. The myth became so widespread that even academic sources repeated it without checking primary sources. But here's what's beautiful. When you actually read medieval chronicles, the truth is right there. The 1216 siege of Dover Castle, defenders cast water and stones upon the enemy. The 1304 siege of Stirling Castle, great stones were hurled through the openings above the gate. The 1428 siege of Orleans, buckets of water quenched the flames. The evidence was always there. We just preferred the dramatic lie. So what do we call them now? Murder holes is a Victorian invention. The medieval French term was machicoulis or assommoir, which literally means destroyer or door-breaker defender. Not sexy, just functional. The holes themselves, tiny architectural features that solved a simple problem. How do you stop someone from burning your door? Answer: pour water on them. Not boiling oil, not molten lead, not liquid fire, just water. And that's the lesson. History isn't always dramatic. The best solutions aren't always violent. Sometimes the thing that saves your castle